All right, so welcome to another deep dive, everybody. Today, we're diving into a question that's, well, it's a bit mind-blowing, really. Is the human brain just a really complex, biological computer? Or could it be something even more crazy? Could it actually be using quantum mechanics? We're going to explore that wild possibility today that our brains might be doing things that even the most powerful supercomputers can only, dream of.
It really is an incredible concept, isn't it? I mean, we think of computers as these machines, right, with silicon chips and circuits. But the human brain, with all its billions of interconnected neurons, it's a computational marvel all on its own.
Oh, absolutely. But to think it might be using quantum mechanics, the same physics that governs, like, the subatomic world, that's a whole other level.
Yeah.
We're talking about things like, quantum superposition, entanglement. It almost sounds like science fiction.
Yeah, and those are exactly the kinds of concepts that have some scientists thinking, hold on, is the brain more than just a classical computer? And to get why they're thinking that, it helps to think about the difference between how classical computers and quantum computers work.
Okay, yeah, let's break that down a bit.
So a classical computer, it uses bits, right, which are like tiny switches that are either on or off, representing a 1 or a 0. But a quantum computer, it uses qubits. And these are kind of like switches, but they can be both on and off at the same time. That's what we call superposition.
Whoa, okay. So instead of just being a 1 or a 0, a qubit could be a 1, a 0, or like both at the same time. That's pretty wild.
It is wild. And this is what lets quantum computers do calculations in ways that classical computers just can't even touch.
So how could that apply to the brain, though? I mean, our brains aren't exactly operating in some, pristine lab environment, right? It seems like a completely different situation.
And that's the big question. And that's where things get really interesting. There's this theory called the Orch-OR theory. It was proposed by physicist Roger Penrose and an anesthesiologist, Stuart Hameroff. And it suggests that these quantum computations might be happening inside microtubules, these tiny structures that are found inside our neurons.
So these microtubules, they're being proposed as the potential quantum hardware of the brain. What is it about them that makes them so special?
Well, according to the Orch-OR theory, the structure of these microtubules, it actually allows them to support quantum states.
I remember reading about photosynthesis in plants and how that might involve quantum mechanics. Are there other examples of biological systems using quantum processes?
Oh, absolutely. Photosynthesis is a perfect example. Plants use sunlight to convert water and carbon dioxide into energy. Right. And that process, it seems to be super efficient because of quantum coherence. It really shows how nature can come up with these ingenious ways to actually use quantum mechanics, even in the crazy environment of a living thing.
Which brings us back to the brain. Is there any evidence, any kind of evidence at all, that suggests these microtubules might actually be hosting quantum processes?
Well, one of the most interesting pieces of evidence comes from studying anesthetics. You know how when we're under anesthesia, we basically lose consciousness? Hameroff, he suggests that might be because the anesthetic molecules are messing with quantum coherence in the microtubules.
So if disrupting this potential quantum activity, if that actually shuts down consciousness, doesn't that suggest that it's vital for how our minds work?
It's a strong argument for sure, and it really makes you wonder, how do our brains create this subjective experience of consciousness,
This whole Orch-OR theory it's fascinating, but I'm guessing there's a lot of pushback from the neuroscience community, right?
Oh, there definitely is. Many neuroscientists, they argue that good old-fashioned classical processes are more than enough to explain how the brain works. They point to the incredible complexity of neural networks and the sheer number of connections in the brain. And they say, look, we don't need quantum mechanics to explain cognition.
So they're saying even though quantum mechanics might be at play at the, subatomic level, we can basically explain what's happening in the brain without factoring in those quantum effects.
Exactly. They say that the brain's amazing ability to learn, to adapt, to process information, they say all of that can be explained through classical models of computation.
That's a pretty solid counter-argument. So where does that leave us? I mean, is there any way to actually settle this debate, to figure out if quantum mechanics is really happening in the brain?
Well, that's the million-dollar question. And to try and answer it, researchers are looking into some really cutting-edge experimental techniques.
Okay, let's hear about those.
One really promising avenue is studying how magnetic fields affect brain activity. The idea is that if quantum processes are happening, they should be sensitive to magnetic fields in a way that classical processes, they wouldn't be.
Ah, I see. So by like carefully exposing the brain to magnetic fields, researchers can maybe pick up on those subtle quantum signals.
Exactly. It's a tricky thing, though. You have to be really careful not to disrupt the very processes you're trying to study. But there have already been some interesting results, I'd say.
Oh, wow, that's exciting. What about those microtubules? Is there any way to actually, see what's happening inside them directly?
Well, that's the really tough part. These structures are just incredibly tiny and very delicate. But scientists are coming up with new techniques, like using lasers to kind of probe their inner workings without damaging them.
Sounds like that kind of research takes a whole new level of like precision and ingenuity.
It really does.
Yeah.
But the potential payoff, it's huge. If we can understand how the quantum brain works, it could completely change how we understand consciousness. And it could lead to new treatments for neurological disorders and even inspire totally new types of quantum technology.
It's mind-blowing to think that the key to all these mysteries could be like right here inside our heads.
It is.
Yeah.
And it really shows you the power of the human brain, right? That it can even think about these kinds of questions.
So we've talked about a lot here, from quantum superposition and entanglement to these wild implications for consciousness and even reality itself. Is there anything else we should be keeping in mind as we keep exploring this quantum brain idea?
One really important thing is we have to remember that the brain is just this incredibly complex system. There are so many different levels of organization and all these processes happening at the same time. So even if quantum effects are happening, they're probably not the whole story.
So it's not a simple either situation like quantum versus classical.
Not at all. It's more likely that the brain is using a combination of strategies. Maybe quantum processes are playing a specific role in certain functions, maybe working together with classical mechanisms.
That makes a lot of sense. It's not about like throwing out what we already know about the brain. It's more about adding this new layer of quantum complexity to the picture.
Yes. And this is where the idea of emergence really comes in. Consciousness, it might not be like directly encoded in individual quantum events. It could be more that it emerges from the complex interaction of quantum and classical processes, across all these different scales of brain organization.
So it's not just about finding like the quantum switch in the brain. It's about figuring out how all these different levels of activity, how they work together to create that seamless experience of consciousness.
That's it. And that's why this research needs a multidisciplinary approach, bringing together insights from physics, neuroscience, computer science, even philosophy and psychology.
It's a huge challenge, for sure, but it could lead to some of the most incredible discoveries in human history.
No doubt about it. And even the journey itself, the research, it's just as fascinating as the destination, I'd say. Every new insight into the brain, whether it's about quantum mechanics or classical neural networks, it just makes you appreciate this incredible organ even more, the organ that makes us who we are.
I love that. And speaking of journeys, we've been on quite a ride in this deep dive today. But before we wrap things up, is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners? Any final thoughts for them to ponder as they keep exploring the mysteries of the quantum brain?
I think the biggest takeaway is this is still an area that's wide open,
Yeah.
full of unknowns and possibilities. We shouldn't be afraid to ask those big, bold questions, to challenge what we think we know, and just embrace the mystery of it all.
That's such a great point. Even if we never, definitively prove whether or not the brain is a quantum computer, just asking these questions helps us understand ourselves better and the universe we live in.
Absolutely. Yeah, who knows? Maybe someday we'll look back on this time as the beginning of a whole new scientific revolution, one that finally bridges that gap between the inner world of consciousness and the outer world of physical reality.
Now, that is a thought to leave us on. Thanks so much for guiding us through this incredible deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
And to all you deep divers out there, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those minds open. Until next time, stay curious. It's amazing when you think about it, just how much we still don't know about the brain. This organ that we rely on for everything, literally everything we do, everything we experience.
Yeah, it's humbling, isn't it? Like even now, with all our technology and scientific advances, there's still these huge mysteries right inside our own heads.
And this possibility of quantum mechanics being involved, it's like a whole other layer of complexity and just wonder, added to the puzzle.
I know. And it brings up these really fundamental questions about what consciousness even is. Is it just like a byproduct of really complex computations, or is it something more, something deeper, maybe even woven into the fabric of the universe itself?
I mean, it's like we're talking about the biggest questions there are, right? Who are we? What is reality?
Questions that philosophers have been asking for centuries, and now science is starting to give us some really interesting clues.
And it sounds like this whole idea of exploring the quantum nature of the brain, it could lead to some pretty huge discoveries. What are some of the most exciting possibilities that you see like on the horizon?
Well, one area with enormous potential is developing new treatments for neurological disorders. Imagine if we could understand how quantum processes might be involved in things like Alzheimer's or Parkinson's. That could open up whole new ways to treat them.
Yeah, that would be incredible, a total game changer for so many people. And what about artificial intelligence? We talked about how the brain might be this hybrid system, right? Classical and quantum computation working together. Could that help us create like more powerful, more efficient AI?
Oh, absolutely. If we can figure out how the brain integrates quantum effects, it could lead to breakthroughs in machine learning and AI.
Yeah.
We might be able to create AI that's not just faster and more powerful, but that can actually do the things we think of as uniquely human, like intuition, creative problem solving, that kind of thing.
Wow. I mean, the implications are huge, right? For everything from scientific research to art and music. I mean, it's amazing to think about.
It is. And it all comes back to that fundamental question. What can we learn from the brain? From this incredible biological quantum computer that we all have.
It really does sound like this whole journey of exploring the quantum brain is just beginning. What would you say to someone out there who's fascinated by these ideas and wants to learn more?
I'd say just be curious. Read everything you can find, and don't be afraid to really dig into those complex ideas. And most importantly, stay open to the possibility that the universe and our place in it might be a lot stranger and more wonderful than we ever imagined.
I love that. That's a perfect note to end on. Thank you so much for taking us on this mind-blowing journey with you today.
The pleasure was all mine.
And to everyone listening, keep those brains buzzing. And remember, the most incredible discoveries often come from asking the boldest questions.